Look, I will tell you as a guy, that's not true. If I can find a 6-part shampoo that's head and body wash and floor cleaner and dessert topping and all that stuff, I'm like, done. So no, we don't switch up too much.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And it is 2020.
Yes, it is.
Except that it isn't. This episode will air.
Well, it depends what the definition of is.
Exactly. Because this episode is airing January 7th, but we are still back in mid-December because we're recording a little bit in advance. So, hey, 2020. I hope everything's great. Anyway, if you have not yet jumped into the Facebook group, this will be your last chance today, actually. The 7th is your last day to join our contest to get in for the drawing that will happen January 7th tomorrow, January 8th. So hop into the Facebook group. You can get there by texting the word story to 345-345, or you can get there via our website, sohere'smystory.com, or our Facebook page.
Okay, ready to go?
See you there. So here's my story. Late in December, I was up to my eyeballs in applications for my daughter's school. And not only is that a ton of work, but it just calls on the worst parts of my brain. It's not my best stuff. So it really drags me down. So anyway, I kept running into this feeling that I have before where there are things I want to work on, but I can't because there's like a pressing need to work on something else that has a timely, a due date coming up or something. And there are strategic things that I want to be doing. Like I kept thinking of things that I wanted to do for the podcast that would really like position us for later or for my band. And interestingly, I was feeling super, super, super overwhelmed, almost like paralyzingly it wasn't almost I was feeling paralyzingly overwhelmed by everything I had on my plate. And there was this extra layer of frustration where there were a couple things for my band that I wanted to do, but that I kind of needed to do. But I was like, yeah, but I haven't made that sign that I was going to make or picked that logo. We really need a logo before we get new postcards made because we have a gig coming up and we didn't have any more postcards. But I was like, well, I don't want to do that until I've actually done this other thing, or I can't do that until I do this. But every time I hit one of those things, I was like, but I can't do that right now because I have to do this other thing. And so here's what occurred to me. I noticed, because that is my prioritization technique, is I will only let myself... I just get super paralyzed and then I do nothing.
That's one way to go.
And then things just don't need to be done anymore. I am prone to rabbit holes if I dabble over in certain areas. So I know how to keep myself focused, is I'll only let myself work on certain things. So here's what I did. And this was really revolutionary for me. So I noticed though that because I was only letting myself work on this one big thing that was taking a really, really, really long time, all this other stuff was backing up and that just was making me feel really overwhelmed, but they weren't really terribly big things. So here's what I did. I decided I was going to take a few hours. It was more than a half a day. It was probably 4 or 5 hours, and knock out as many of these little things that were barriers to other things. So I knocked out a super fast logo for my band, threw it up on the Facebook page, ordered new postcards, out of the way. Then I did another little thing that frankly was fun and exciting and gave me energy, and it knocked some stuff off the list. And the important thing that it did was it took away this energy I was having where every direction I looked, every email I saw, every thought that popped into my mind of something I needed to do was feeling heavier and heavier because I was bogging down. So I took this period of time to clear out some of the clutter, and they were more fun things. So it gave me energy. And I came back to this big project with as a totally new person. And so I think what was interesting to me about this is we talk about priorities a lot and focus a lot, not necessarily you and I, but just in the world of business, as focusing on what's most important, what's the big rock, and what really, really matters. But I think there's absolutely a time and a place where coming through and swiping out a bunch of niddly little, technically not was it super important that I do a band logo and get us new postcards? No, it's a hobby band. It's not the end of the world if we don't have new postcards. But all of a sudden I had all this more energy.
Well, it's interesting that you say the big rock, because when you were talking, what I was thinking about is that demonstration that I'm sure you've seen and people
Yes.
have seen, where you have the tub of water, however many,
the big glass jar. Yeah.
and you've got big rocks, little rocks, gravel, and sand. And the
And then
moral
water.
of the story, spoiler, is that if you put the big rocks in first, so you do all those things first, everything else will find a way to fit in the nooks and crannies. But if you put in the sand and the water and the gravel
You'll
first,
never
the
get
big
the big
rocks
rocks
make it
in.
overflow.
Hysterically, I have a past client, who I told that to one time and insists on telling other people that I made that. She's like, Jody has this great thing. I'm like, it's not mine. I tell her over. It's so embarrassing because people are like, you didn't make that up. I'm like, I didn't say I made it up.
And I also did intermittent wipers.
I invented gravity and various other important things.
So, and it's, it's a neat presentation. If you've seen it, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, wow.
Yeah. And it's very useful.
It's very useful. But there's a lot of value, and just like you were saying, in the fact that you have to acknowledge that just because you haven't put the sand into the container, it doesn't mean it's not there. And it doesn't mean it's not weighing on you. And sand, frankly, gets everywhere. I mean, so if you have sand around you, that means you are not coming in completely focused, because sand is very distracting.
No, seriously.
So, and no, I think there's a real value. And one of the things that you had said is that, and I think this is true for so many things, that what you really want to accomplish is really the second or third step, because you need to do this first step, design the logo before you order the postcards or design, whatever it is. And I think there's a real value in creating like a foundation day. Today, or this half day, I'm just going to work on those little things that are the foundations for the big
foundations,
issues.
Or in my case, they all felt like barriers. There's like, you have to back up 3 steps. Like, I just need to get this one thing done, but I can't even do that until I go and do these other things. And well, let's be serious. I don't have time to go do all of that. So I guess I can't do this thing at all. And it will just have to then, I think that was part of what was so interesting to me is really recognizing the weight of any individually not done thing. And while some things weigh more heavily than others, all those teeny tiny things still do, if you put 5,000 pebbles, into it still weighs a lot, even though they're tiny. And I was just feeling the weight of all that. And I couldn't believe how much better I felt after and it was more than just I felt better because those things were done. Here's where it really showed up. And it's hard to explain how great this felt. But the difference was, prior to getting some of those things off the plate, not only were they hanging in my head as like to-dos, but it really was like I'd be scanning my inbox and I would see an email about a thing that was like, oh God, I am not doing that. And then I would go to Facebook and I would see that we had a gig coming up, and I'm like, oh, and I haven't done that thing. And like, so I kept hitting all these. I was just constantly barraged with the feeling of getting more and more and more behind. And that on its own was this weight that was dragging me down. And so, yeah, it was a little bit of a risk, frankly, because these applications were really involved and they took a lot of time. And, if I hadn't finished them, I might have regretted spending the better part of a day doing all these little things. But I don't think I would have gotten as far as quickly had I not taken the time to clean out some of that just garbly, weighty, annoying energy. And that stuff was fun. And so I also have more energy on the other side of it.
So a couple of things. First of all, I don't want to let it go past it. I think that you coined the word garbly.
I'm quite certain that's
and I'm
not.
Anyway, I just didn't want that to go by unnoticed, because I like the word, because
Garbly.
Although I hadn't heard it before, it certainly does seem apt. But one of the things that I keep thinking is that there is something, it's like the tyranny of block time, that I look at a task and I think, well, I can't do that. It's really important. I can't do that now because I need a full 2 hours. And that 2 hours is going to take me from beginning to end, but I don't have 2 hours.
Right.
And so I tend to put it to the side, as opposed to thinking, well, maybe I can actually divide it into its foundational piece or its precursor and devote the half an hour that I do have and kind of chip away at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's really important, because I neglect to do that a lot.
Yeah.
I only think in terms of block time.
So and it's not even that I think that like this particular strategy is the strategy, but it did remind me of a couple of different ways that I have picked up from clients or other people about how they think about their time. And so I thought it was worth mentioning like a couple of them as well, because I think all of these things I have used at different times as like a test to like, will this help me feel better? Will this help me get more done? My friend Andrea Lee says she has a zero tolerance for overwhelm. Because in the way she looks at it is, if you are overwhelmed, you are giving over to the acceptance of like, this is all the better it can get. Like, because overwhelm doesn't just go away on its own. Like,
Right.
and so she said when she feels overwhelmed, she becomes, hyper vigilantly focused on curing the overwhelm, whatever that takes. And so when I feel that way, I try on a couple of these different things to figure out how to best tackle what's on my plate. And I have one friend who divides his, the only things he pays attention to are, these are not his words, but like big risks, that like things that are at risk of like, falling off the rails or whatever, and big opportunities. That's how he, like, when he has a bunch of stuff, he's like, all right, I'm either going to tackle this or this, and sometimes I find that one helpful. I have another person, the blocks is what made me think of it. She keeps several lists. One is lists of things that need a block of time, so that each week she'll pick like 2 of them and put them on her calendar so that they have that block and they don't just sort of hang out there. The other thing that she puts on her has a whole separate list of, which I just find fascinating, and it's why I asked about her list, is she keeps like, there's to-dos, and there's to-dos, there's errands, there's tasks, there's errands, and then there's decisions. And I may have mentioned this on a past episode, but I saw that and I said, why do you have decisions? And she said, well, I just came to the realization one day that a lot of the things that just hung on my task list weren't actually tasks, they were decisions. And she goes, and simple things like register for that event 2 months from now or whatever. She goes, if it hung there, it was because it wasn't the act of registering. It was that I hadn't decided whether I was actually going to go or not. So that goes into my decision pile. And then I bring like my decision brain to the decision list and I make decisions. So that's another way I kind of try to segment out overwhelm into more tackleable. I'm just going to make up words the whole day.
No, that's okay. And I think you should. I think we'll have at some point, we'll have Christy maybe go through every single one of our episodes, or Brittany, and come up with words, and then we'll have a dictionary.
There you go.
Just for the podcast.
So here's my story
but
dictionary.
I really do like that decision list. But the thing about the blocks of time, as we get back to it, and your initial point, which was the smaller things that I was describing as sand, is I've heard one of the time management strategies that people say is, look, I only will return emails from 11 o'clock to 12 or from 1 o'clock to 3 or whatever.
That doesn't work for me.
That has never worked for me.
Me either.
One of the reasons is that when I see, even if I don't read it, if I see these emails come in, they become like sand and they weigh on me, even with my effort, and they detract from my focus to do block time on whatever it is, because I'm wondering, what is this? Is this important? I'm ignoring this and it's over here and it's on my mind. And a lot of times I can't just let that thing pile up. So
well, I think the strategy in that is you shouldn't even you wouldn't even know they were there if you just never looked until 4, but that doesn't work for me either.
And that might be it. When my wife and I would go on vacation, we used to, way back, have these kind of tense conversations because she really hated the fact that I would call the office to check in. And this is before email and before everybody was so connected. And it took a while until she realized, yeah, I'm much better off if I know what's going on. And then I can focus on other things when I know that the place isn't burning down. Well, the same thing with that strategy of I'm going to turn off my email until 3 o'clock and then I'll focus on it, because it'll still be sand in my gears. I'll still be wondering what's going on. And I need to have those little things.
So interesting. I don't have a huge data set on this, but thus far I have 100% accuracy on this hypothesis that married couples almost always have the 2 opposite vacation mentalities. For a while, I had a number of clients that were actually in business, married couples that were in business together. And it was a huge bone of contention, is because one of them would be for me to relax on vacation, I need us to be completely off the grid and don't check in or whatever. And the other person would really struggle with that, not because they were some kind of workaholic, but just they would feel better if they could just check in, just simply, and not even do much at all, but just to check in to make sure that they knew that there wasn't, the place wasn't burning down or whatever. And it seems that there's always one of each in every couple.
Yeah. And I do think certainly the people with my mentality that need to check in or that need to at least know a little bit of what's going on, I am certainly susceptible to being weighted down by the sand, the little tasks, just like you were saying, you have all this block time, but you needed to take the time to clear out all of those other little things. Mm-hmm. And then you can focus. And that's kind of the way I approached vacations too. As long as I knew certain little things were cleared out or were dealt with, I could be fully engaged in whatever it was, whether it was the block task that I had in front of me, or whether it was just a vacation. I could be fully present, but only once I cleared out the little
you just brought up a really important point. Was there was so much on this day that I did it. There was so much like swarming. To me, they almost felt like all these little gnats like swarming around me, like pig pen of these things. I was like, oh my gosh, all these things are weighting down, that I couldn't be really like I was doing a bad job at this big project because I'm like, oh, there's this and there's that. And interestingly, it was taking me longer than I thought it would to do all those applications. And so there were a number of those little tasks. One of them was sending in money to the class parent of my daughter's class. So to get the teacher present thing or whatever. Right. So that did have a timeline. If I didn't get it done, then I'd be after the fact when she had already gone and bought it.
Right. February's not good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a small thing. And sure, it's only like 5 or 10 minutes, but there were like 80 of those things. Mm-hmm. And there were literally like 80 of them. And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to take, I wasn't going to take days and do this, but I said, I'm just going to spend a couple hours and clear out as many of these things that I can and see if it makes a difference. And it made such a difference. It's something I'm going to keep in my awareness for when I'm feeling that way of like, maybe it's the little things, or maybe it's this, or maybe
now, are
that.
you going to convert to your friends' series of lists of errands and tasks and maybe big projects or decisions, or that doesn't work for you?
No system works forever for me. Different days, it's like a multiple personality disorder when it comes to like organizational systems. They all keep me organized, but I sort of have to like, there's that old adage that you can't use the same shampoo. I don't think it's true, but when I was a kid, there was this sort of like old wives' tale about if you use a shampoo for too long, it stops working. You have to just like switch shampoos every so often. I don't think that's really true, but that's sort of how I feel.
Look, I will tell you as a guy, that's not true. If I can find a 6-part shampoo that's head and body wash and floor cleaner and dessert topping and all that stuff, I'm like, done. So no, we don't switch up too much.
Okay. Yeah, that was fine. I don't think it's true, but it does sort of apply to my things. I use them as triage tools. I use them, like there's no one system I use exactingly all the time, but I use these as like specialty device tools to see which one will clear out the yuck in that particular moment. And sometimes I need this kind and sometimes I need that, because they're different problems. It's like Overwhelm comes in like 35 flavors.
Well, it does. And I'll tell you, because just thinking about this, so I use I don't know if it's a task app. It might be called by some a productivity app, but it's called Todoist.
Right.
And so it's a list, obviously, but then you can label it for deadlines and dates and who, because we have it enterprise-wide and divided by project and all that stuff. But when I look at my list, I've got probably, if I looked at the list right now, I probably have between 40 and 50 things on there. However, some of them, there are at least 5 that go back a year, right? And it's not for a client or anything like that, but I know one. So I was really motivated to check out changes in disability policies because there was something I was worried about. And I had the consultant come out, and I even had the, what was in conjunction with life insurance, but the nurse came out.
The story just gets sexier and sexier.
I know. And he gave me a nice bound book, and of like 4 options. And I never read through it enough to look at it. And he, to his credit, he got back to me a couple of times. Hey, just checking on this. And he goes, I'm going to wait for you to check back on me because I don't want to bug you about this. And I still haven't done it.
You will never do that.
Now, that quote those quotes are well expired.
Yeah,
I'd have to
exactly.
start the whole process again. And I'm betting if I look back at every single one of those stale tasks, it would, it's because they're decisions.
Yes. The decision one has been just mind-blowingly life-changing for me, because to recognize how many things are decisions, and then interestingly, just the fact that I recognize that they're decisions sometimes helps me make the decision. I'm like, you know what? I don't really want to go to that thing. Like my hesitation, because when I really want to go to a thing, I do it.
Yeah.
And I go ahead and register for it because I don't want to forget about it. I didn't really want to go. So take it off the list, put it away, decide you're not going, and delete it.
Right. And one of those 5 that go back a year is call so-and-so to set up lunch. Because I know this person has been wanting
You're not going to name them?
No, I'm not going to name them.
Please don't.
But
It wasn't me, was it?
But it was one of those people who called me up, and we've had a previous episode on this, and said, hey, listen, I really just want to get together and pick your brain on this. And it wasn't a legal thing. It was just on how to run the business and all that stuff. And I'm not stingy with that kind of advice, but I don't.
Except when you are.
This was the third one. I had gone to lunch. I had gone a second time, but I don't want to continue to do that.
Yeah.
But I didn't take it off my list. But it's not because it's really time consuming to call.
No, it's a
because
decision.
of the decision.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the days of our lives, and I think this is how you can start to. I would love to hear from some of our listeners around, like, how do you cut through the fog and the clutter and the sand and whatever other metaphors we use? What shampoo do you use?
What shampoo, definitely.
But I'd love to hear that, whether you're in the Facebook group or you can send us an email. You can also text us at a number that I can't remember off the top of my head. So we'll put it in the show notes. I know it, but I just don't have it in front of me because we're still recording in our
recording
little,
in our temporary studio without any paper. So Jody, by the way, Jody is under a severe handicap in this episode because she cannot doodle. She can't
doodle anything. And write and record things. So things kept flipping out of my head and I don't remember them. So anyway, that's it. That's our episode.
That's the episode.
No, I will end with this. One last note on Overwhelm, which is hysterical, is years and years and years ago, I was in a group and there was a woman who wanted us to sort of look over her thing. And it was a freebie that you give away to get people's email. And it was 35 things to try, 35 things to stop overwhelm or something like that. And to this day, I just laugh hysterically because that literally makes my skin crawl. I'm like, oh my God, give me one thing to stop overwhelm, not 35.
But that's the greatest title ever.
So good.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.